It's Friday, October 20th, 2017, and this is Seahawks Chats with Kenneth Arthur. And with me this week on Seahawks Chats, not Seaside Chats, Seahawks Chats is Seahawks Chats, Danny Kelly of The Ringer, formerly of Field Goals, formerly of Reel in the Field Goals, which was this podcast, and now it's sort of a reunion of sorts. Danny Kelly.
What's up? Good to talk to you, man.
It's good to talk to you as well. I'm having a hard time getting words out for some reason, but yeah. Oh wait,
you're nervous. I know.
That's every week. Oh no, yes, but especially nervous this week because Ellie is here. Are you fucking kidding?
Reunion. These reunion shows are always a little weird,
right? You know,
how much time has passed. I don't know.
Is the chemistry still there? Was the chemistry ever there? That's what
you're wondering if she's interested. And now maybe I'm interested. No.
Oh man. And Danny, it's been about a year and a half since you went to the Ringer and I took over Field Goals, and it's been a year and a half. That's it.
Yeah. How are the Seahawks doing?
Seahawks are doing okay. I don't think that they've been would you say that they've been, I mean, obviously you still follow the Seahawks quite a bit, so, even as a general NFL writer. Would you say that the Seahawks, I'm jumping right into a question about the Seahawks,
Let's do it.
I bring it up somehow. It just, when you said that, it made me think, do you think the Seahawks are any better or have changed at all since the start of the 2016 season? Or would you say that's about the time that they became what they are now and they haven't really improved or gotten worse since about then?
I think that they're probably deeper. I think that generally speaking, obviously the offensive line is still a huge issue, and that's probably a big reason for some of the times that they struggle. But I think defensively they've got a lot of depth. I think getting Sheldon Richardson was huge, and clearly we're not completely freaking out about the Cliff Averill thing, which we'll talk about later. But they have enough depth to kind of survive without Cliff Averill, which I don't know if we would have probably felt that way before. Obviously, a lot of people talk about the Super Bowl when Cliff Averill went out, everything changed. I think the Seahawks are going to miss him, but they've got a lot of pass rushers to kind of step in and do well. So I think they're deep on defense. I've been pleasantly surprised with how they've played on that side of the ball. At times, obviously the run defense has been sort of out of character and everything, but I do think that they'll get that worked out. I think it probably had to do with getting some new guys in, Sheldon Richardson, probably having to sort of adapt to the new system and all that. I think that probably had a lot to do with it. Now, offensively, it's easy to think oh God, they're terrible, they suck. And I remember thinking that several times throughout the year. But it's also it seems to happen every year. The Seahawks are always very disjointed and out of whack early on, and then they seem to get things going. So again, they feel pretty similar to last year. Obviously, Russell Wilson's not hurt, which is big. Knock on wood. But I think that they're deeper this year than they were last year. I think the long and the short is I do think that they were a deeper, more talented team.
Yeah, I mean, and they also, I mean, in terms of being deeper and whether or not they need to be deeper right now, I mean, injury-wise, Cliff Averill obviously just been lost for, that's an unexpected, not that, I guess, in terms of expected, unexpected, losing Cliff Averill would fall closer to the unexpected spectrum. He's been a pretty healthy guy throughout his career, especially since coming to the Seahawks. And Luke Jokel is going to be out for, a month or whatever.
Oh yeah, that hurts.
Yeah, that's another, you don't want to lose one of your offensive linemen that, and now we can think about what the offensive line really, George Fant, Luke Jokel, Justin Britt, Jermaine Afidi, who has been better than we maybe expected, I think, and certainly I think as the year has gone on has looked better and better. That seems like it would have been a pretty okay offensive line, but now without Jokel and Fant, less so. But that being said, injury-wise this week, it seems like they're coming in with a pretty good stacked-ish lineup. Other than Jokel and Averill, everybody that you thought, everyone seems to be back. Quentin Jefferson is already back from a broken hand.
Wow.
Jeremy Lane is going to be coming back this week. CJ Prosise is expected to come back this week.
What? So he might play?
Yes, he's expected to be there. So
that's great.
It's a pretty healthy team right now, relatively speaking. Unlike the team they're playing, the New York Giants, who have
Man,
lost all
yeah.
their receivers. You know,
It is nice to not have to worry about Odell Beckham, I guess.
Sure. I mean, it's crazy. It's I was asked this question, classic 5Qs question from the Big Blue View, which was which Giants player would you take if you could? And he didn't allow me to take Odell Beckham, I guess, because he was hurt.
It's not fair.
And my answer was like, well, I would take Odell Beckham because I think that he is maybe the best weapon in the NFL overall. And I think, my answer was Evan Ingram next because I was taking into consideration contract, age, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, wow, if you had Evan Ingram for the next 5 years, that tight end, they're looking for that tight end position to be solidified. Jimmy Graham is, 31 and coming into a contract year and averaging 8.5 yards per catch. What would you say for it's a little bit of a question on the Seahawks and the Giants. Which player would you take from the Giants if you could?
I know. I was just looking at their roster. I mean, if you take into account,
roster. They've got a lot of. I mean, I went through the list and I detailed it in my long answer to Big Blue View because I give long answers. People don't give me maybe the other blogs don't give me back long answers. But hey, look, I'm not calling anyone out. But maybe that's what happens all the time. And maybe I even say, hey, do you want the long answers or the short answers? And that's what we'll exchange. And maybe they say like, oh yeah, long, and then maybe they don't give that back. Anyway,
some feelings on this.
Do I? I didn't say anything. Maybe I whispered a few things. But in terms of the Giants, it's like you go through and it's like, oh, they've got a great guard. They've got a great cornerback. They've got a great safety. They've got 2 great defensive ends. So there's got a great defensive tackle. So there's no shortage, I think, of players from the Giants to consider despite their 1-5 record. So what do you think?
I mean, yeah, like if you have to take into account contract, money, like club control, all that stuff. I mean, my first impression was like, oh, I'll take Olivier Vernon, but then you think like we're going to add another, like one of the highest paid players in the NFL to that defense. I just don't think that makes any sense. The next person I went to was Landon Collins, who could be a potential long-term replacement for Cam Chancellor. I think that would probably be a good move because I think he had a breakout year last year. He's a really good player. Offensively, I do like the Evan Ingram idea just because, I don't know if Jimmy Graham is going to be around past this season. He's sort of, one of those sort of joker tight end type guys, a guy that can kind of like line up as a receiver, also line up closer into the line.
Also, he's trying to take it down Gotham.
Yeah.
Everyone tuned out of the podcast. Okay, go on.
I'm just looking at the rest of the roster. It's like, I don't know if I really want any of the offensive linemen.
You don't like Justin Pugh?
I mean, I guess I haven't watched him closely enough to know whether he's great or not. I mean, he's probably better than what they got on the Seahawks line. I think
Justin Pugh is a pretty good guard, and certainly the Seahawks at left guard or even right guard or whatever, but left guard. I mean, I think you could make the argument that would make a huge difference if they had a just significant upgrade at any position at the offensive line other than center.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think offensively, there's not a lot of guys on there. I think Evan Ingram probably be the top guy after Odell. Sterling Shepard is really good too. I mean, obviously, it would be great to have Janoris Jenkins or Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, but I don't think the Seahawks need to be spending a ton of money. Ton of more money on the defense when you've got so many guys already on that side making so much money. So probably. By
the way, they're spending $34 million on Olivier Vernon and Jason Pierre-Paul per year, and that's signed for the next 4 years. So over $34 million per year on those 2 players, whereas Cliff Favre, Michael Bennett, and Frank Clark cost $17 million per year.
Yeah, I mean they gave Olivier Vernon like the richest contract ever, I think, on a defensive player last year, and gave Pierre-Paul an extension this offseason, and Snacks Harrison is highly paid, I believe, and they definitely have a lot of money in that defensive line, which, by the way, I'm pretty worried about this weekend. I think that's going to be a tough matchup for the Seahawks. That's a really, really good defensive line.
But Olivier Vernon is probably not going to play. So
that's good. That's good.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, what is the final? You have to answer this. Are they going to do a platoon at left guard now? Is that the latest?
Yeah, the latest is that they'll be rotating Glowinski and Posick.
Okay. We'll see how that goes. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the rationale behind that plan?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. It's just something, I guess. I don't understand entirely why the Seahawks don't seem to be that aware of their the quality of their offensive linemen, because sometimes it seems also like they really aren't starting the best 5 guys, which I don't know if that's because maybe they start with a plan and then they make a few changes, because we always see them start with a plan at the offensive line and then change it up a bunch, I think, in the first couple of weeks or month of say training camp or mini camps or whatever. And then they just stick to that. And that's like, they're like, this is it. And it takes something like really massive, like a horrible start by Jamarcus Webb or an injury for them to make any changes. But, the fact that they've been this adamant against Ethan Posick, their second round pick, because it's like they didn't hesitate to put out Justin Britt. They didn't hesitate to put out, I think, John Moffitt. They didn't hesitate to put out some of their other second or third round picks, I think, and at offensive line. And so the hesitation for this team, maybe because he was a center. So, I mean, even then it doesn't really matter because they've transitioned other guys around and put them out there. Yeah. George Fant as a rookie was out there. And so for Posick not to be out there on one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, they're really adamant against that for some reason. So I guess maybe they're just going to, he must have some sort of huge hole in his game that they're just like, oh man, it's going to get exposed. I don't know if he's going to be running plays and passing plays. Who knows?
Yeah. So I was just thinking about it. I guess on some level, it does make sense that they don't really know what they have, because you only get 10 padded practices a year as a team now under this new CBA. So it's I don't even know, maybe they've had 2 or 3 by now, if that. And add in obviously preseason games and things like that where you can get some information. But I mean, really, you can watch a guy kind of go through the motions without pads and all that, but it's completely different when you're going full speed with a guy, full pads, helmets. And so I guess I can kind of understand that, but to me, it seems weird that they're not sort of settling on one guy as a starter, and if he doesn't do well, then they could replace him. It seems like, what does a platoon accomplish other than lessen your continuity on the line? And it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I don't know, nothing on the Seahawks offensive line has really made sense over the last couple of years. It's just they haven't really had many hits on the offensive line the last couple of years. Especially hurts to see kind of Russell Okung is playing well this year and things like that. It's man, wish they would have spent some money on him. But I kind of, again, it's I can see that because he was not dependable health-wise. There was
also Russell Okung is making $12-13 million a year. So
so they had to.
There's no way. There's no way that they could fit that $12-13 million in without, who are you going to get rid of? People can say just get rid of Jimmy Graham or something like that. Not quite that simple, but if you'd rather have Russell Okung than Jimmy Graham, it still extends into the next 3 years past this year where, maybe they don't have Jimmy Graham. And so that $10 million comes in and they can use that $10 million on, extending Frank Clark or something like that. Cause now they're going to have to, probably extend Frank Clark, and maybe some of that money comes from Cliff Averill, who may not return. So, there's other things around, but it's just with the salary cap, there's only so many things you can do on the offensive line, or any unit is going to be, that's why they're trying. It's why any team is going to pick maybe a position where it's we're going to try and draft this really well.
Right.
And maybe they feel like offensive line, I don't know why they would, because this is absolutely not true, but maybe they feel like offensive line is something you can find in the later rounds or the late first round, because they know they're not going to usually have top 10 picks. But I would say offensive line, if anything, is one of the only positions where you have to have a top 10 pick to get a good one. At least.
Yeah. No, I saw you tweeting about that last night. I totally agree with it in the sense that I don't know what you tweeted, everyone complains about the Seahawks offensive line, and obviously the Raiders spent tons of money on their offensive line. But if you don't spend money, then you get, if you don't spend money on that, then what you get, or if you do spend money on that offensive line, then what you get is the Raiders defense.
Right. And the Cowboys too, you know.
Yeah.
And
So
the
I
only
totally,
team
yeah.
right now that seems to have, I'm trying to maybe one of the only teams in the NFL that seems to have a good offensive line and a good defense is the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep.
You know, because they got Jason Peters and Lane Johnson and Kelsey, Jason Kelsey or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers, you know, they've got a good defense and they've got a good offensive line. But other than that, you know, it's like, yeah, if you're gonna, you can say, yeah, they have this great offensive line, but the defenses for like the Raiders and the Cowboys are terrible.
I mean, yeah, and that's why, you know, there's there's very, very few very like really balanced teams anymore. Yeah. And yeah, I mean that's the salary cap era. That's the Seahawks have decided that, you know, they want to invest on defense, and I really can't fault them for that. I think there's probably plenty of decisions that you can look back in hindsight and be like, well, they could have used that money better. You know, like for instance, Jimmy Graham, I think kind of is like the classic example of like, oh, they should trade him, get rid of his contract, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure they saw him as like a touchdown maker, you know, like touchdowns are really fucking important. And when the time they got him, it was like he'd scored more touchdowns than, I mean, he was like in the top 5 in touchdowns in like last 5 years, if not higher. So like, I'm sure they saw that as like, this could help us with, you know, scoring and touchdowns, and it's just what Russell Wilson needs over the middle field. Like there's plenty of like, you can definitely sort of defend the logic in it. But I mean, now when you look at kind of how the Jimmy Graham era has worked out, like with his injury, and he hasn't really been sort of the threat in the red zone that anyone wants. It's like, man, I wish we could have used that on offensive line or two, you know, and that could be totally different. But this is the reality of the salary cap. This is the reality of football. Yeah. So it's an interesting sort of exercise to look at different teams and how they spend their money, because really, yeah, like you said, like the Eagles, there's a couple teams with like really good defenses and really good offenses, but I mean, it's like they're like what happened there is like they've hit on a lot of draft picks.
Yeah. And just, you know, since this is the first time you've come on this year, we can just sort of recap the Seahawks season so far and get your opinion there. The Seahawks are 3-2, just running through some of their rankings this year for different units. 16th in points scored, 6th in points allowed, 5th in turnovers, you know, so giveaways, 7th in turnovers forced. So, you know, that's a good thing too, to win that turnover battle. 20th in net yards per pass attempt, 20th in yards per carry, 6th in net yards per pass attempt allowed, 30th in yards per carry allowed. So the rushing defense.
That's the weird part. Yeah.
Not been great. The Seahawks are 13th in DVOA, 18th in offensive DVOA. And if you break that down, they're 21st in passing and 13th in rushing. And
there's 13th in rushing? That's really surprising.
I think Chris Carson, you know, was pretty good.
That's true. Here. Yeah, that's true.
The Seahawks are 12th on defense, including 5th against excluding 5th against the pass and 26th against the run. So their pass defense has been, you know, pretty good. That includes 57% completions, 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 6.1 yards per attempt, and a rating of 70.8 while going up.
I mean, that's really good. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, Brian Hoyer, Marcus Mariota, Jacoby Brissett, and Jared Goff. So
that's not exactly a murderer's row, obviously.
But, you know, Jared Goff had good numbers prior to that. And still, but like, you know, so, you know, it was a good shutdown, I think, in going to LA, and for them to do that in LA and force 5 turnovers was pretty good. Yeah,
no doubt. No doubt.
The Seahawks, you know, they have that win over the Rams. They blew out the Colts. They lost on the road to the Titans and Packers. Both games, you know, the Packers by 8 points, the Titans by 6 points, and then they barely beat the Niners at home 12-9. So with that being said,
this all sounds so familiar.
Yeah. But with all that being said, you know, how do you feel about the Seahawks right now? You write about the general NFL. Like, how do you feel about the Seahawks in terms of how good they are against the league?
Well, I'm not really confident in the Seahawks this year. I think in past years I've been a little bit more bullish on them, which maybe that's a good sign, since I was really bullish on them last year and they ended up kind of staggering around for a long time before they figured it out. But I just worry about them not being able to run the ball. I think that's kind of the main thing that worries me so much about this season, is like they really seem to be very, very committed to running the ball and having that be their identity. And this is what we are. This is who we're going to be. This is what we do. And I don't know if they will ever find a way to do it. Like, honestly, I just like the way that Thomas Rawls is kind of always hurt. Eddie Lacy doesn't really show a whole lot. CJ Prosise is always hurt. Like, JD McKissick is probably the most exciting, but he's more like a space back. Like, he's on the outside, kind of running routes and things like that more. I just don't have a lot of, I guess, confidence in them being able to run the ball at all this year. So my question is, like, are they going to sort of change their identity, or at least adapt this year in order to like be able to succeed? Because I really don't know if there's a way that they can figure out how to run the ball. I just don't really trust the offensive line. I don't think the backs are good enough. And, so basically through 6 weeks, I just kind of question like the identity of the team. I don't really know what the identity of the Seahawks is right now. And so it's kind of, I think that's colored my impression of, or like my opinion of them so far this year. They don't feel offensively like the same team as before. Defensively, I think they're great. I think they'll figure out the run thing. And I think the defense is still the foundation of the team. And
for sure,
I think it gives them a chance to win every week. But I don't know. The offense is still very sort of hit and miss with me.
Yeah, the Seahawks run game, over the last 2 weeks without Chris Carson, Eddie Lacy has 20 carries for 71 yards, 3.5 yards per attempt. Thomas Rawls came back last week. He had 8 carries for 20 yards, 2.5 yards per attempt. So neither of those guys contributing much. CJ Prosise, like we said, should be able to return this week, but we'll see, how much of an impact he can have in the run game, more of a passer, catcher. He has 8 carries for 20 yards on the season. So that's, some things to definitely to monitor for them. And the Giants are 20. They've given up 4.3 yards per carry, 123.5 yards per game. They rank 25th in yards allowed, 23rd in yards per carry allowed. And in DVOA, they are 27th against the run. So some opportunities there for the Seahawks to go in and establish some sort of a run game. This is weird. As I look at this, the Browns are 32nd against the pass on defense in DVOA and 3rd against the run.
Really? That sounds like the Dolphins are similar, I think, like really good against the run and terrible against the pass. Or maybe it's
the Dolphins are 28th against the pass and 2nd against the run.
Yeah.
The Cardinals are 24th against the pass and 4th against the run.
What's going on with all these pass defenses? Yeah. I think that obviously the Giants looked really bad.
The Jaguars are 1st against the pass and 31st against the run.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, the Jaguars, this is kind of an aside, but the Jaguars pass defense has been insanely good. You just said it, but but
they didn't shut down Jared Goff last week. I was just surprised because I was like, oh man, Jared Goff. He did struggle. He didn't have a high yards per carry attempt, but 11 of 21. Okay, so 11 of 21 for 124 yards and a touchdown. No interceptions, 3 sacks. Yeah, they shut him down.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game closely yet, but I just looking at the stats from some of their corners, like Boye. How do you say that? Boye? Boye and Ramsey are like insanely good so far. And and then obviously they've got a really, really great pass rush. So I don't know. That Jaguars team defense is fun. Obviously their offense is terrible.
That'll be an interesting game. Week 14 at Jacksonville. It's the only 10 a.m. game of the year.
Oh God. At Jacksonville, 10 a.m. against that defense. Seems like a tough matchup. And the Seahawks can't defend the run. By then, hopefully they'll be defending the run, but
oh man, Leonard Fournette. I think Leonard Fournette might be the best running back in the NFL. All due respect to Kareem Hunt, but it's crazy just that the 2 rookies are there right now.
Yeah.
But over the last 2 weeks, Leonard Fournette has 49 carries for 311 yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns.
My question for you: do you think that Fournette is going to do you think he's going to last the whole year? I'm just thinking they're going to wear him out.
I think he will. I mean, I don't like utilizing any running back a ton. But it's interesting because some of the other guys I was just looking at, I just ranked running backs for Sports on Earth, sportsonearth.com, Kenneth Arthur. Go check it out. I ranked the running backs. But it's like Le'Veon Bell, who's on the franchise tag, and the Steelers are like, well, this might be your only year for us again. So he had 35 carries against the Ravens and 32 carries against the Chiefs, which is like, 35 carries against any team these years is freaking insane.
Yeah.
Plus, he's a guy that he's caught 30 balls. So his touches are out of this world.
Yeah, I think I saw that that Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell make up like 70% of the Steelers offense, which is like insane. So what is it? 32 times 16. That would be 500 carries a year if they did that.
Well, think about DeAndre Hopkins, who has 65 targets, which is more than it's like double all the other receivers for Houston combined.
Yeah, I love that. I think the receiver thing is different. Like, I don't mind them force feeding receiver necessarily, but like asking a guy to carry the ball 512 times a year, that's like a bad idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Fournette is really good. But it just makes me worried.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm a little torn because, I mean, I think, especially with the Jaguars, it's like they have to have some semblance of an offense, and Fournette's doing it, and Blake Bortles, you want to give him as little to do as possible.
Yeah.
Just fucking bench the guy, man. Like, just bench him. I mean, who cares? He's so bad. Like,
well, they're paying him so much money this year. It's crazy.
He's so bad. And the Jaguars could be good, and they're 3-3. They won't sign Colin Kaepernick. They won't sign Robert Griffin III. They won't sign anyone else. They won't try Chad Henne. They won't make a trade. It's interesting because it's like in this era, it's like teams aren't going to be ballsy enough to make trades like at the deadline that could actually, make a difference, like quarterbacks or something like that. There's rumors of, what about Eli Manning to the Jaguars, because Manning
I would love that. That'd be fun.
Older. Tom Coughlin's in Jacksonville. Like, it makes them. They're not going to do it. What about, I'm trying to look around. I mean, there's all Brian Hoyer, no. Mike Glennon, no.
No.
Andy, don't know. There's not a ton.
Would they trade Andy Dalton? That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Probably won't. I'm sure they won't. But
the Bengals have won their last two games. It's been pretty convincing. The Browns convincing, and then beating the Bills is pretty good, but they lost to the Packers in overtime, and they lost to the Texans by 4 points. So I think like the Bengals might still make the playoffs.
Yeah, they're better than people are giving them credit for. Yeah. Their defense, I think, is ranked 3rd right now in DVOA.
Oh, wow. So
I mean, they're still a really good defense. And going over to Bill Lazor, he's, I think, kind of figured out what Zampese was doing wrong, and kind of, obviously they're force feeding it to their best player and AJ Green, which is huge. And, they still got some talent. Obviously it hurts that Tyler Eifert is out basically forever.
Yeah.
But
these injuries this year, I mean, I feel like we do this every year where this is the worst injury year, and it's like, no, it just always happens. But this is the worst injury year, man. Aaron Rodgers and J.J. Watt and David Johnson and so on and so on. And so Odell Beckham, this
Chris
sucks.
Carson,
the best player in the league.
I'm so bummed about Chris Carson, though, because I was like all about him in the preseason. I kind of felt like, it was a hot takey, but I was like, man, this guy's going to be the starter, blah, blah, blah. He looks so good. And then he did play really well. And then he broke his leg or whatever. Such a bummer.
Yeah.
But yeah, the injuries this year have been insane. I think, we've never had an injury situation where it's like so many superstars, I don't know. It'd be interesting if there was like a study on like how many actual injuries are, if it's actually worse than before, but like for sure, like the star power has been crazy.
Anyway, well, let's preview the Seahawks and the Giants. It's this week. It's in New York. It's at the MetLife Stadium.
Home of the Super Bowl.
There's talk about, Seahawks play well there, but the Giants, are 0-5 going into last week. Then they go to Denver, which has a great defense themselves, better defense than Seahawks this year, maybe. and they win
so.
23-10, which is just insane. They go up against Trevor Siemian and like the
Siemian.
Yeah, Siemian.
We're really bad at names today, man.
Yeah, maybe that's maybe that's the key is the Broncos don't have a great quarterback or whatever, but like he's pretty good. He's not terrible. But they go in and they win 23-10. So the Seahawks, they can't really. And then you look back at their previous 3 losses, which is at Philadelphia, maybe the best team in the NFL. They lost by 3 points. At Tampa Bay, they lost by 2. And I think that one, I can't remember all the details, but I feel like that was really close at the end. And then the Chargers, they lost by 5. And the Chargers, for all of how much they blow at their they just blow their games every year in the beginning to open every single season.
How much they blow.
How much they blow. You can look at the fact that maybe the Giants have had the toughest schedule in the NFL to some degree. 4 of their first 6 games are road games. They go to Dallas, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and Denver. Brutal. They host the Lions. They host the Chargers. And so, maybe the Giants aren't that bad. And now they're hosting the Seahawks, and the Seahawks have to travel across the country. So 1-5, 3-2, does it even matter to you? Or do you think that the Giants are a tough team?
No, it honestly doesn't matter to me. And I mean, I been talking about it a little bit this week. I hosted the Ringer NFL podcast earlier today, and I was talking about how I think it's a really tough matchup for Russell Wilson. I think that, this Giants defense has always been good to me. I don't know what happened in the first 5 weeks that made why it sort of snowballed on them, but I still think that they're really good. We'll see, how Wilson handles it, how the Seahawks offensive line can handle this really good defensive line and everything. And hopefully it will be pleasantly surprised, and maybe the Giants will prove me wrong and they are in fact bad, but I just think that they're better than what they've played. And it's actually interesting listening to you rattle off all their close games and all their opponents, because I'm like, it just never felt like this team was as bad as they've played. Now the question is, can they sort of replicate what they did on offense from last week, which seems kind of unlikely. I think Eli Manning, every once in a while he'll show something, but overall he's a very average quarterback. And losing Beckham is big, and I don't know. I just, I don't have a ton of faith in that offense, but I've always kind of thought that the defense was good and a lot of really good pieces, a lot of really good players. And it makes me nervous. It makes me really nervous going over there. I think just based on the Seahawks offensive line situation, the fact they can't run the ball, it seems like a really tough matchup.
Yeah. When we talked about,
what's the line? Do you know?
I could look at it real quick, but Landon Collins, Janoris Jenkins. There's not going to be a Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, but those are. It looks like the Seahawks are +4. So, that's the turnover differential.
There's a whole bunch of different lines. It's 4.5 and 5.
Yeah,
the Seahawks are favored.
But the Giants. I think we rattled off some of their good players. Their offense is it stinks. Their receivers, it's insane. Right now they're going with Sterling Shepard being injured as well. They're going with Roger Lewis, Tavares King, players we've never heard of before are their starting receivers.
Yeah, and they just got up from the practice squad, I think, a couple of them. Yeah.
So Orleans Darkwa, too, is their starting running back, and he looked pretty good against the Broncos, but, who knows what he's going to bring week to week. These running backs, you never can tell with running backs because it'll be like, oh, here's this guy named Aaron Jones. You've never heard of him before. Yeah. Literally never, which is crazy to me. I think I spend a lot of time thinking about how guys can be completely anonymous. You look at NFL players and you'd think they all come from why don't they just all come from SEC schools? Because it's you're a great high school player, you're a great college player, you're a great NFL player. But it seems like so many NFL players, good, great, whatever, are they never even came close to getting an SEC offer or a Division I offer or whatever. It's amazing to me how many guys can be not good for college but good for the NFL, and come from total anonymity, because it's how many people could tell you where most of these guys went to school? Not many.
Yeah, look at Kareem Hunt. I don't know.
Totally.
Toledo, right?
And Kareem Hunt, it's phenomenal. We're watching the game last night. I do think that Kareem Hunt, with it, even pass blocking, it's similar to Chris Carson being an all-around good back for the Seahawks up until his injury. I think Kareem Hunt could be the best running back in the NFL, and he wasn't even considered for the first round or the first day or second day.
Yeah, he went to Toledo, and I think people were like, "Oh yeah, he's got great stats and everything," and he never fumbled in college, all this stuff, so he's got a lot of traits. But yeah, he was a third rounder. It's like,
yeah.
And we talked about like Fournette and McCaffrey and Cook and all these like big name guys, but there's a lot of talent out there. I mean, Chris Carson is a great example.
So talking about the rest of the NFC West then, because, talk about the Seahawks and the Giants a little bit. So the Seahawks, obviously their main goal here is going to be win the NFC West, and their biggest competition is the Rams, though, maybe the Cardinals could get on a run here.
No, I wrote about Peterson this week. He looked good, man.
That. We'll see.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, no. I hear you. It's interesting. It's interesting how much we forgot about him because he didn't play pretty much at all in 2016, and then he's maybe just in a terrible situation in New Orleans. So maybe. Because I was gonna bring up some of the stuff that you wrote this week on the Ringer. You're writing a ton. It seems like you got something coming out every other day at least.
I do write a ton. Thank you for noticing.
Of course. And yeah, can Adrian Peterson fix the Cardinals offense? So what was your answer? Why don't you get the TLDR on the Adrian Peterson Cardinals offense?
So essentially the short answer is he could. When you watch that game against the Buccaneers, like the way he changed their offense and the way he impacted the game was actually pretty shocking. Like I was watching, I was like, Jesus, like if you watched, so Larry Fitzgerald scored a touchdown. I think it was later in the first half. Literally 5 Buccaneers defenders like bit on the play action fake and like got completely out of position.
Mm-hmm.
And this is after he'd kind of, like set the tone. He was running really hard in the first half. And I think he had a rushing touchdown on his first drive, and then he was kind of just like busting these big runs everywhere, left and right. And that like changes the way that a defense thinks. And Adrian Peterson's one of those guys that I think is probably pretty revered, among players for the most part, especially the older ones that have kind of seen him in his prime. And I think that sort of respect factor, it's kind of like the Marshawn Lynch thing. It's like, defenses have to gear up to stop him. They have to mentally gear up to tackle him. And that can have a positive effect on a couple of things. One, it can slow down the pass rush because, when you don't have any respect for a team's run game, like basically what had happened when they lost David Johnson is like no one there scares you. Like Chris Johnson's not scaring anyone. Kerwin Williams isn't scaring anyone.
Right.
So what they can do is like they basically pin back their ears. They know you're not going to run, especially when you only get 2 yards on first down. It's kind of like what's happening with the Seahawks. It's like when you only get 2 yards on first down, then you can like put your ears back, pin your ears back, and rush the passer like a bat out of Hades. And like, Carson Palmer was just getting killed the first couple of games. And what happens with Peterson is like just him being back there like slows down the pass rush because one, now they can run on second down and still get positive yardage. They can, they can run in any situation, and it basically like defensive ends have to have their head on a swivel. They have to be looking for blocks. They have to make sure they're manning their gaps. They can't just rush up field like crazy. So having that run game kind of helps that. And then two, obviously in the play action sort of, world, they're not like a big play action team, but last week, at least they did really well. They got a couple of big plays out of it because, the defense was gearing up to stop him so hard. Now, I mean, the Buccaneers defense has been bad. Mm-hmm. They're really banged up. Right now they're 31st in DVOA. So yeah, they've been really bad. So it's, obviously there's tons of caveats to that, but I mean, he looked rejuvenated. He looked like the like something close to the old version of Adrian Peterson. And so, if they get him, if they can run the ball on first down and gain positive yardage, put themselves in good situations, it could potentially change the whole offense. The main thing is protecting Carson Palmer. And I think having a run game will help a lot with that.
Yeah, just some of the numbers too. The Cardinals in the 5 games before Adrian Peterson rushed for 259 yards, dead last in the NFL. They averaged 51.8 yards per game rushing. And then Adrian Peterson, with Adrian Peterson, they had 160 rushing yards against the Bucs. Mm-hmm. So like almost half, like 33% of their rushing yards came in one game with Adrian Peterson. And they're still dead last in yards and yards per carry, just in spite of that. That's how bad they were. In their previous 4 games, they scored 16 points, 17 points, 18 points, and 7 points. And then they put up 38 points against the Bucks. So like a little less than like the exact same total of the previous 4 games. Mm-hmm. But, the Cardinals too, not without their varied faults, are 19th on defense, 24th against the pass. So
the defense hasn't been as good either.
Because it's like Patrick Peterson is great. Tyrann Mathieu is, I think, inconsistently great, Mm-hmm. And then you're looking at, Tyvon Branch and Justin Bethel. It's not like the most fearsome. And then the loss of Calais Campbell, I think, was huge. I think everybody can agree with that. Chandler Jones has 7 sacks in 6 games, but they don't have a pass rusher.
Right. Well, and I talked about this a bunch during the offseason because, you kind of like have a lot of time to write in the offseason. So you dig into different things. And I was like, one thing I looked at was like how many snaps certain teams were losing in free agency and like, just trades and all that. It's like the Cardinals lost like, I don't know what it was off the top of my head. It was like 5 out of the top 8 players in snaps last year left. So they're replacing like a ton of snaps. So it's like almost like a completely new team.
Yeah.
Some of the guys they got new were like, they're talented players, but you have to like, learn together and know how to play as a team and all this. Like there's all that chemistry stuff going on, like learning the system. And in a lot of cases, like, losing Calais Campbell there's an enormous talent drop off and production drop off. So I was actually really worried about this Cardinals defense, coming into the year. I just thought, it's going to be tough for them to replace all those guys. And it's kind of borne out. Like, they haven't at least hit their stride yet. I mean, they've got a lot of talent, but I don't know if they can get back up into the top 10, like, where they've kind of consistently been over the years.
It'll be interesting to see where they stand in 4 weeks because their next 3 games are at the LA Rams, bye week, at the 49ers, Seahawks. So their NFC West is right now.
Interesting.
And they're 3-3, so they're 1 game or they're half a game behind the Seahawks. They're not even behind the Seahawks practically. So that's where we stand right now. So if it's Adrian Peterson is the difference, then suddenly we can't write off the Cardinals like I very clearly did, within the last couple weeks.
I mean, the thing about anything right now is who can you write off? Like you can write off the Giants for the most part, even though I think they're better than their record says. But it's like so many teams have like 2, 3, or 4 wins right now. It's like 3/4 of the NFL. It seems like.
I mean, realistically, the 49ers are the only team that are out of it.
Right, and the Browns. Oh yeah.
In the NFC. But the Giants, they're probably out of it because the Eagles, they're never going to catch up with the Eagles. So that means they have to get a wild card. They probably can't win enough games to win a wild card. The Bears, I don't think they're going to get anywhere with Trubisky. They just got some work to go. But even then, it's like the North is not going to be won by the Packers, in my opinion. So
probably not.
It is kind of up. The quarterbacks in the North are Brett Hundley, Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Bradford, something like that, and then Matthew Stafford. So it's like, I don't know, maybe Matthew Stafford just takes the
last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I don't think the Bucks can win, either.
I want to hear what your opinion is on the Saints. Do you think the Saints could contend for the playoffs?
I mean, if you're, a year ago, the Saints were my pick to win the NFC South. And, I made my points that said like, if their defense was even a little bit better, they should be the best team in the division because they can score.
Yeah, I can see the logic if they just improve like marginally,
Yeah, and right now, they gave up 38 points to the Lions, but it wasn't. I think that had a lot to do with
they had 2 or 3 touchdowns on defense.
Yeah.
Right.
So 52-38, but they've won 3 straight games. They're playing the Packers this week, so it's like Brett Hundley's first thing is going to be Brett Hundley versus Drew Brees. I think you got to believe in that. And the next 2 games are against the Bears and Bucks. Then they go to the Bills, so they could easily be 5-6-2, something like that by the break, or 7-2. I mean,
I'm kind of into the Saints.
Sure, I mean they're a fun team to watch, I think, and definitely their defense. That's the thing too. Like when they won the Super Bowl, it's just all about. Could they force enough turnovers to make their defense to make up for the fact that defense was also going to be, giving up a lot of third down conversions and long drives and, that kind of stuff. Because right now they're 7th in turnovers.
Yeah.
Kenny Vaccaro he's been playing pretty well. So it's like some of their draft, and I think Marshawn Lattimore has been a huge pickup through the
Dude,
draft.
he was really, really good last week. Yeah.
Yeah,
They got
it's
some, I
good.
mean, you look at their roster, it's like Jordan Cameron, first round pick, Sheldon Rankins, first round pick, Kenny Vaccaro, first round pick, Marshawn Lattimore, first round pick. And then they got Von Bell, second rounder, Marcus Williams, second rounder. They've got like, and then the former Husky Kakaha.
Sheldon
He's
Rankins was one of my favorite players in that draft, and he's super quiet this year, but he's there.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Cameron is one of the best players in the NFL. I think no one really knows a lot about him because he's been stuck
Cameron
on like one on the, what did I say?
Jordan Cameron.
God, it happens every single time. Sorry. Cameron Jordan. Yeah, I wrote about him earlier this year. In fact, I made a joke about how everyone screws that up. So that's
You should just call him. I'm just saying, call him Cam Jordan, because you would never say
that's
Jordan
true.
Cameron.
That's true. Cam Jordan. Jordan Cam. No, but I mean, they've got a good defense. Like in terms of the talent on that defense is decent. It's not like an amazing defense, obviously, but like they're playing up to their potential. Finally, it sounds like last year. I mean, they had 3 or 4 cornerbacks go down, and so that was really like a huge hit for them. And so I don't know. I think they could be like middle of the pack this year.
So,
which, like you said, is like a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Saints could definitely be a sleeper for like maybe the number 1 seed, that kind of stuff. We'll see.
Man, that'd be crazy.
With the LA Rams, they're 4-2. Their wins over the Colts, the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars. Their last 3 wins in total have come on the road. They're just 1-2 at home. So they're playing good on the road. They're 3-0 on the road. So it's like they've got that going for them, and for the first time they seem to have a semblance of an offense with some pretty good defensive players. I think Jared Goff, you watch him play, I think it's still pretty not great. I think the passes are inaccurate too often. I think he makes mistakes. I think they're dialing him down so much to the point where it's like they just are trying to avoid the mistakes. He's got 3 interceptions in 6 games. So like, okay, cut down mistakes. But I don't think he can make big plays, and I don't think he can, he's not at the stage in his career when you can be like, okay, we need you to turn it on and win us this game. I don't think he's there yet. Todd Gurley, surprisingly, because of his 5 fumbles and everything, 5 fumbles in 6 games, he's like 29th in DVOA and DR. So it's like, despite his MVP type like talk, he's actually, maybe he's a huge liability in that respect. They've got more weapons with Robert Woods and Sammy Watkins and Tyler Higbee and Cooper Kupp. So the offense is there. So, is it enough?
I think clearly they got off to a super hot start. And so that, colored my opinion of them early on. I was like, man, they really turned around. And I think it's true that they definitely have turned things around. And I think with Sean McVay at the helm, like they design a much smarter, much, more logical offense based on what they have, based on their weapons. Like I think they were just banging their heads against the wall for so long under Fisher. It finally seems like they're using their weapons right. And that like they're finally using Tavon Austin even like to make big plays. So we saw against the Seahawks. So it'll be interesting to see if Sammy Watkins kind of picks up steam and becomes like a number 1 receiver for them, because I think that could be big. But yeah, I mean, I think Jared Goff has taken a huge step forward. I think obviously he's still, a second-year guy who was one of the worst rookie starting quarterbacks like ever. And so I think there's much less of a worry that he's a total bust this year, which is it's a huge deal. I mean, it's a huge jump still, even if he is going to struggle and look like a second-year guy a lot. And I think, they have to feel good about how he's played, even if it's not been what it looked like early on in the year. So I think that their offense gives them enough where they're not going to totally crater like they did last year. I think like early on they started out 3-1 last year, and it was like the defense did everything. The offense was like atrocious, and I was like, I couldn't see them going a whole season with that bad of an offense, like doing anything, and that's kind of what happened. I think they won like 1 game more after that the whole year. I can see this offense giving them enough, picking up their part of the slack, and I don't know if they're going to challenge for 500. I think that they're going to be a team to worry about in the NFC West. I don't know if they're going to challenge for the division or not, but I still think, they've made a big enough jump that they're worth sort of talking about and as a potential playoff team.
Let's do some to wrap it up. Let's do some rapid fire Seahawks questions. Get your thoughts on some Seahawks again. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Who are your top three right now? Top three most important players on the defense?
Oh man, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, and Frank Clark. What do you think?
I would probably say Earl Thomas, Frank Clark, and Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Actually, was almost about to say oh man, where do you put Bobby Wagner in there?
Because Bobby Wagner right now, he might be the best. I think he might be the best linebacker in the NFL.
Yeah,
which is
I think that's safe.
He's 27 years old.
He's been seriously balling out. Like, it's underrated how well he's played so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's developing into it. I mean, let's be honest, a Hall of Fame linebacker. I mean, the way that he's been playing, if he plays this way for another 4 years, absolutely a Hall of Famer.
I mean, I just love watching him play. He just knows where the ball is going. I mean, it's like he's closed the gap on Kuechly in my mind. It's like the best middle backer in the game. I think Kuechly's still probably better, but with him out and dealing with the concussion issues, I don't know, man. Who else is up there with Wagner at this point? I mean, I can't think of someone off the top of my head that
someone
is that good.
Yeah, because there's definitely.
I'm sure we're missing someone. I guess maybe Vontae's perfect has been really, really good.
There's definitely someone who I feel like is especially this year, really dynamic. That at the linebacker position.
Hightower, Shazier.
Yeah, maybe there's not. Maybe it's just. I mean, I like the way Miles Jack is playing, maybe, but that's still a far, far, far way away from Bobby Wagner right now. Yeah, there's not really maybe anything.
Sean Lee,
this moment, all good players, but no Bobby Wagner. I mean, it was Kuechly and Wagner and Navarro Bowman maybe, and now it's Bowman just changed teams. Man, we'll see how he does, but rapid fire.
He hasn't been playing. Sorry, he hasn't been playing as well as he was before, though. But let's rapid fire.
What's your thoughts on Sheldon Richardson? 5 games in, has it been living up to the Sheldon Richardson expectations?
No, I think it hasn't yet. I was expecting a little bit more. The Seahawks pass rush was a little bit. It took a while for them to get going, and I guess that's kind of expected. But I was expecting a little bit bigger impact immediately. Now that being said, I really like him. I think he's a really good player, and I think he brings a lot to the defense. I'm still very high on him. Hasn't been quite as extraordinary and awesome as I was hoping, but I still think he's a good, really, really good addition.
Do the Seahawks need to make any sort of, I don't want to say change. What do you think of Shaquille Griffin and the cornerback situation opposite of Richard Sherman this year as compared to the last couple of years where they've struggled with that position?
I've been really pleasantly surprised with Griffin. I was worried about it coming into the year because I thought they were going to play him kind of off a lot and try and protect him a little bit. I thought he was going to give up a lot underneath and all this stuff. It just a little bit worried me. And I mean, any rookie really probably would worry me, but I thought he's played really, really good. I think he's starter quality looking player. And I think getting Justin Coleman involved, I think is really interesting. And I don't know where that leaves Jeremy Lane going forward, but both of those guys, Coleman and Griffin, have played really well. And I've been really pleasantly surprised with it. I think that's part of the reason their pass defense has been so good so far.
Frank Clark had 10 sacks as the number 3 defensive end last year. He'll be the starting defensive end for the rest of the year. He's got 2.5 sacks in 5 games. And those come, it's not like he had them all in one game. He had half a sack in week 1, a sack in week 2, and a sack in week 5. What do you think? What is your over-under for Frank Clark's year finishing with sacks?
Let's go. I mean, it's probably good. I would say 10 again. I think he could definitely go over that though. But I would say just based on the start, it's not been quite as fast as you'd hope. I mean, that's just been the story of the Seahawks or defensive line. Like, they just weren't getting the kind of pressure you expected with that much talent. But hopefully things snowball for them and they start to kind of get that figured out, because I think there's just too much talent on that defensive line for them to not get more pressure and more sacks. But I would say over under 10. Yeah.
Will Deion Jordan have an impact on the team this year?
I'm not expecting anything.
Player that you could have back tomorrow with full health, Deshaun Shedd or Malik McDowell?
McDowell.
Why?
Because like I said, I've been pretty happy with Griffin. I don't think that, I mean, I don't know if I don't think he's a high impact player. I'll put it that way with Shedd. I think that Malik McDowell could be.
Mm-hmm. Michael Bennett having a good year?
I don't know if it's been as good as the past. I think I still think he's a really great player, but no, I don't think he's been as good. And again, it's kind of like repetitive, but the Seahawks pass rush just wasn't very good coming out the gate. So, I think going forward, he could end up having a bigger year, but it's been a little bit disappointing.
More important player to extend, taking everything into consideration, like need and contract size and all that kind of stuff. Jimmy Graham or Paul Richardson?
That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Neither. Can I say neither?
You can say neither.
I'm guessing they probably won't extend either. I mean, yeah.
Are you?
I think Paul Richardson's good. I think he's been a solid addition to their passing attack this year, but I would rather extend Tyler Lockett long term.
Right.
I'm
intrigued by Paul Richardson. We've always been intrigued by Paul Richardson, but certainly I think this year where you're like, okay, maybe he could be healthy. He's only 25. Mm-hmm. He makes perhaps outside of Doug Baldwin the most impressive catches on the team.
Yeah, like one a game.
Yeah.
Can you get him on a Jermaine Kearse contract, whatever it is, like $2 or $3 million? I don't know, what was Kearse making, like $3 or $4 million? If you could do that, that's fine. I just don't want to go not that he would necessarily draw this, but I don't want to go. You don't want to go too high on him.
Who leads the team in rushing by the end of the year?
I guess Rawls, if he can stay healthy. Rawls, I think. But I mean, I don't know. I haven't really been impressed with Lacey. I think he needs more time to get to the line, and if he gets ahead of steam, he's good. But it's hard to get ahead of steam with this offensive line. So
yeah,
Rawls, I think.
Bigger cause of the offensive issues: Darrell Bevel or Tom Cable?
Man.
John Schneider.
Well, I would say probably Bevel, because I think the buck stops at him more than with Cable. But obviously, you're not pleased with the development of most of the offensive linemen, and the player selection hasn't been good either. I think the buck stops at the player selection with John Schneider and Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
But I would say Bevel, just because I've been really frustrated with the Seahawks offense this year, just because it doesn't seem, like I said, it doesn't seem like they have any identity, and it doesn't seem like they're that willing to adapt at this point yet. So I just don't, I don't know. Nothing about the Seahawks offense is exciting to me. So I would say Bevel.
Russell Wilson having a good year?
Not really. Not so far.
I'm going to say,
he hasn't been having a good year. What?
At the end of the day, Russell Wilson, when we say it's not maybe the best year for him, but at the same time, you look at it and it's like, here's a guy who, over his last 3 games too, he's got a rating of 99. He's completing 66% of his passes. He had 4 touchdowns against the Titans. He had 3 touchdowns against the Colts. He's going up against the Rams defensive line with his offensive line. And he still had a really good game. He's had a couple of mistakes and some overthrows. So it's like, if this is a bad year for your quarterback relative to his other years, you've got a pretty good quarterback, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to like let me delineate between do I think Russell Wilson is good and do I think he's having a good year? Like I think he is good, but I haven't been super excited about his season so far. I think it's been like in spurts you've seen like, okay, that's the Wilson that we know. But it's been short spurts and it's just been frustrating for the most part, I think, So no, I mean, I think you're just being over. I think if you say that Wilson's had a good year, that's being overly generous. I think he's underwhelmed, and it's not his fault. It's not all his fault, but I mean, frankly, just it's not been. I mean, who's had fun watching the Seahawks offense outside of that Colts game?
Yeah, it's tough. But like, I mean, it's interesting because his 2015 season was so good. 34 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That the way he finished that year was insane.
That was like a lot in the second half too, right? Like
it was all like the last 7 games, basically.
There's still time. There's still plenty of time for him to have a great year.
He's a very good second half player, so we'll see how it goes there. Final score prediction for the Seahawks and Giants.
Oh man, I don't even know which team I'm going to pick at this point. I think I would probably say Seahawks 17, Giants 13.
I'll take it.
What do you got?
It's going to be tough for the Seahawks to score, that's for sure.
But it's going to be really tough for the Giants to score, I think.
I'll say that, the thing is just going to be protecting the football. If the Seahawks don't turn it over, I think they'll win by a lot. If they turn it over a couple times, 2-3 times, they might lose. So I'll say that they do a good job of protecting the football. 1 turnover, and I think they forced 2 turnovers, and the Seahawks win that game 24-16.
Nice.
So, there it is. That's it for the return of Real in the Field Goals as a Seahawks Chats podcast with Danny Kelly. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny B Kelly. Definitely read his articles on The Ringer. They come out every other day or so. Do you have like a series of anything that people can check out? Like, oh yeah, look out for this every blah blah blah.
Yeah, I do. I do like an article with a fantasy football lens on Tuesdays usually. So basically my schedule is like I write off of the Sunday game. So like I'm writing on Sundays and publishing on Sunday evening and Monday morning. And then Tuesday I do like an article kind of like looking at bigger trends in the NFL, sort of relating it to fantasy football. Last week I wrote about just some of the emerging tight ends in the NFL, which are kind of exciting guys. And then Wednesday it's like a bigger, like more in-depth look at stuff, and then on Friday it's kind of a look forward. So that's kind of my schedule.
Great. Check it out, guys. That's it for this week on Seahawks Chats. Come back next week for some sort of other chat with another human being.